Yeah, I knew we would come to this, looking at the human mediated music and technology mediated music, it becomes a political kind of a discussion sooner or later, which is fine. So, how much time do we have? Okay, this is a more sociological question, again, after my heart. So, I was thinking when you talked about regulation, right? I understood regulation completely differently as an anthropologist, sociologist, and I was looking at how you can use music to manipulate and whip up a frenzy. Say, for example, nationalism, right? Propaganda, war, the Holocaust, stuff like that. And this, then music goes on complete, it transcends certain personal realms or even social realms and becomes a different thing altogether, which can be manipulated away, away from the individual, right? So, you are scholars, you have certain methodologies and affordances to study a certain kind of music, right? So, how would you study a phenomena like this? Right, because it's not the individual you're studying, it's not a community, it's a different social realm that has its own life. Okay, so how would you look at this and study something like this? So this would be my.
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, obviously, music can be used for manipulation by certain parties, like, for example, in political contexts, to evoke certain connotations via musical means. Or if you think of, indeed, like nationalism and music, it's like music is not only a force for good, but it can be used as a force as a negative force as well. Because always when you bring people together by musical means, you also take them further apart from some other people, or you leave some people out of it. So it can be divisive in that sense as well. In terms of how to study it, that's a really good question. I had an idea about consumer behavior. You can you can continue, but that's like something that has been studied in terms of using music as a sort of a subliminal ways of manipulating people's behavior. So using music in stores or in advertisements and things like that, have been shown to systematically affect this sort of non-important purchase decisions, or how much time you're going to spend in a place, or how quickly you are eating, or how much money you're spending on drinks and things like that. So that's one way of trying to see this sort of manipulating effect of music.
Yeah, and I think actually one of your studies is a good example of studying this. When you studied how presenting very gentle, wonderful, loving music sung by a female voice, and it was either an Indian or a West African. Ah, okay. So different cultural musical styles, but both like very gentle and pleasant. And people were rating Indian and West African. Were listening to one of these and then rating Indian and West.
Reaction time.
Oh yeah, the reaction time. Yeah, you could actually describe this better. But the effect was that if you had been listening to an Indian music, you would be having a more positive stance towards Indian people, whereas if you had been listening to West African music, you would be more positively evaluating West African-looking people. So that is a nice manipulation experiment where we show that how music can be a social force of social cohesion and collaboration between different types of people.
Yeah, just to add to quickly, that indeed the aim was just to see if music can function as a form of inducing affiliation or affiliative feelings, or make you feel more bonded to. If you present music as a product of a certain culture, do you feel more affiliated with that culture after engaging with it in an enjoyable way? And that's what we found. That's it. Yeah.
So some questions we can still take before we stand between you and lunch. Yeah.
So this is more from the, I was just thinking from an anthropological point of view, or rather something from a historical point of view rather. When we are talking about, you're talking about digital music and live music. So I would want to say differentiate between music coming from a mechanical means versus an electronic means. So mechanical means, it happens that you would, so whether it's a violin, it is something like a saw against a tree, it would have probably started something of that sort. Or you have hammer tongs, that's where you have the piano hammers and stuff like that. So that is how it would have evolved. And because there's thousands of years that we have actually responded to mechanical sounds is why we feel closer to it. And maybe 2000 years of electronic music, people will feel closer to electronic music. Just thinking, maybe that's the reason we respond better to music, which we call as natural music, is basically the ones which are coming through a mechanical sound, mechanical means rather than an electronic means.
The iGen will not agree with you at all. No?
I just had a comment on this. So if you look at what is the physics behind sound, be it a mechanical instrument or an electronic, at the end it's just the sound wave, the pressure of air, right? That's where the whole variation happens. So be it from an instrument or from a speaker, the mechanism again is the same.
Okay, so that concludes the session. Thank you, Mr.